welcome everyone to our first FrameWORX for 2026. We have a great lineup of topics throughout the years, and happy to join. I guess next time we're going to rope off the back to pews of the church chapel here and everyone sit up front, but that's okay. Today we're really focused on a really important topic, oncology and cancer, and just want to kind of set the framework as to the why this is such an important topic. I suspect pretty much everyone in the room has had either a family member or a friend impacted by cancer, so it's really an especially important salient topic. In Indiana, it's a disease that has 42,000, well, not just one disease, but multiple diseases, 42,000 new cancer cases diagnosed annually. Takes about 14,000 Hoosiers' lives every year, and it's the second leading cause of death here in the state. From an incidence perspective, we actually have a lower incidence rate here in our state, but unfortunately a higher mortality rate than the national average of 163 versus 146 deaths per 100,000 people. And so we're about 12% higher mortality rate. And perhaps we'll talk about a little bit about why we think that is in our sessions. So really a big public health challenge for us as citizens and residents of Indiana. The leading cause of cancer death in Indiana is lung cancer. And we have a higher incidence rate here, 67 versus 52 per 100,000. This is personal for me. I lost my uncle and aunt last year to lung cancer. They're both non-smokers, and they both had stage 3 cancer by the time it was diagnosed and went pretty quickly. So this is an area that I'm pretty passionate about. Some risk factors are driving higher mortality for us as a state. We do have higher smoking rates here in Indiana. We have higher prevalence of obesity. We have a larger rural population that is challenges with access to preventative measures, and then screening and early detection gaps in regions throughout our state. So hopefully that sets a bit of a framework as to why cancer is highly important and relevant for us to be talking about today. So with that, we've got kind of a 4-part session here today where we'll bring together different voices from different dimensions of our community. First off, we'll have a panel of leaders from our academic research centers. They're talking about the really innovative research happening at our universities. And then we'll bring together some leaders from industry that are some leaders within Caris and Roche and Lilly who are helping shape precision medicine to make oncology and cancer diagnostics and therapy much more targeted. And then we'll have a patient panel, because at the end of the day, it's all about the impact that this disease has on people, and also the impact that innovation has with regards to helping people with cancer. And then lastly, we'll have a panel talking about, I'm spacing. Radiopharma. We are the radiopharmaceutical capital of the world here in Indiana, and really great innovations and collaboration happening to advance our sector in this emerging and fast-growing area of oncology, therapy, and diagnostics. So with that setup, I want to invite our speakers for this panel to join us here at the front, please. Have a seat, gentlemen. Let me start off. I'll ask each of you to introduce yourself and a little bit about the institution that you represent, please. Brian, I'll start at the end and work my way over here. So.
Sure, I'm Brian Black. I'm the Director of Drug Discovery at the University of Virginia.
And maybe the area of research that you do.
Okay. And so my group in general works on proteostasis, but the center does a lot of different research. We focus on neurodegeneration and cancer primarily. So we have a drug in late phase 2 for neuropathy we developed. And that company recently got bought out by Biogen. And then we've been working with John Foldelson here as our CEO, and we're spawned a company a couple years ago called Granus. We helped to bring an oncology drug to the clinic next year or two.
Kelvin?
Kelvin Lee, I'm the director of the IU Simon Comprehensive Cancer Center at Indiana University. My personal research is in multiple myeloma. I see myeloma patients and we work on myeloma immunotherapy and novel therapeutics. The Cancer Center does cancer research, translation, development from stem to stern, all the way from individual molecules to large populations. And so we cover the waterfront from early diagnosis, prevention, mechanisms of response and drug resistance, all the way to the epidemiology. Some of the statistics that you heard about smoking and cancer come out of the Cancer Center as we identify populations, rural populations, communities that are at risk, and then how do we get out there.
Great. Wade?
Good afternoon. I'm Wade Clapp. I'm the chairman of pediatrics at the School of Medicine and the physician-in-chief at Riley. My personal research focuses on genetic diseases with a predisposition to cancer, particularly RASopathies, neurofibromatosis type 1, which is the most common genetic disease with a predisposition of cancer in humans, and NF2. We have done a lot of work on developing accurate genetically engineered mouse models to identify genetic and pharmacologic targets and combine that with proteomics technologies that have enabled us to repurpose 3 drugs that led to sort of first in human therapies for indications in NF1, and the 4th one just came out last summer in the New England Journal in neurofibromatosis type 2.
Congratulations on the publications. For the record, we did invite the Purdue Institute for Cancer Research. They actually have a visit from the NIH grant reviewer, so we thought that was a good excuse for them not to be here. So we wish them luck on that site visit from the NIH team. So Brian, maybe talk a little bit about beyond your own research laboratory efforts, maybe the broader cancer research landscape at Notre Dame, and what are the areas of other expertise of your colleagues up in South Bend, and then what maybe the direction of your research center up there in Notre Dame.
Sure. So the Cancer Center at University of Notre Dame is smaller than most. We're still growing. We're still can hire more people. But we do have expertise in several areas, including animal models, in ovarian, breast cancers, metastasis in general are things, as well as we have a few people working in immunology cancer as well. So there's it's small, but the people are very good that we have. I hope we can continue to expand that. In the drug discovery space, we made a number of people, number of hires. Since I got there 8 years ago, I think we just completed our 7th hire was Herman Sinton. We recruited from Purdue, who's also working. He has an oncology drug and ready to go to phase 1 as well. And then we made hires from other universities as well. So we're building a good drug discovery group, and hopefully we'll continue to grow that. But I think now we need to focus more on getting more biologists and cancer biologists on campus, so that we can really have a bigger impact.
So with Notre Dame not being tied to a school of medicine, what's one kind of your source of research funding? Is it NIH or is it industry sponsored? And how do you overcome the fact that you don't have a academic research hospital formally associated with Notre Dame?
Yeah, it doesn't really hinder us, to be honest with you. So some of the best institutions in the world aren't affiliated with medical centers, like Scripps Research Institute, for example. So I don't think that's holding us back, because at the end of the day, we go to try to collaborate with the best people out there. And if they're local, that's great, but sometimes they're not. And that's where Notre Dame is. We have several collaborations going on with IU, but we're also associated with Northwestern, Michigan, OSU. I mean, we have a lot of collaborations taking place. So I don't think that's a problem. The goal is to work with the best people.
And then from a source of research funding, is that NIH, is it industry sponsored or a kind of combination thereof?
No, it's primarily NIH, a little bit DOD funding, but primarily NIH. We do have some donors that will insist on different things at times, but that's less common.
Kelvin, with regard to the IU School of Medicine and the Simon Cancer Center, are there particular areas of strategic investment that you're all making at the center, and maybe talk a little bit about that, what strategic direction you're all taking under your leadership?
So it's like herding cats. We're strategically, no, I am joking. We are the only NCI designated comprehensive cancer center in the state of Indiana, and our catchment area is the entire state of Indiana. And I think part of what allows us to really leverage that is IU Health is also distributed across the entire state of Indiana, so we have a reach across the state. And I think that one of the things that is really remarkable for those of you who don't know it is that the IU cancer effort goes back at least 50 years, and really in the pantheon of cancer research and medical oncology really is one of the first. Larry Einhorn's curing of widely metastatic testicular cancer center was a incredibly pivotal moment in cancer, in general, because prior to that, if you had cancer that had spread out of somewhere, and you had metastatic cancer, you were dead, right? Essentially, if you couldn't get it operated on, you were a dead person. And that was the paradigm. And then when Larry did clinical research showing that platinum-containing compounds could cure people that had testicular cancer everywhere, that all of a sudden, I remember this in high school. I'm aging myself here, or dating myself. I remember thinking to myself, look at that. You can cure somebody that has cancer everywhere. And that was a sea change. And that set, I think, for generations of cancer researchers as a sort of a pivotal advance in cancer research. And Simon has continued doing that. Has continued through Hal Broxmeyer's pivotal work in cord blood transplantation, which is now something that is being explored across the globe. Being, cord blood is an easy source of hematopoietic stem cells that is accessible, essentially globally, and allows a variety of things, not only treatment for hematologic malignancies, but gene therapy. And that was really developed at IU. And then work that Way's been doing in the NF1, NF2 cancers and conditions has been really pivotal in that area. And so our focus really has been not only on, our focus has been on the whole breadth of cancer research, all the way from how cancers start, how do they progress, which raises this question of can you do what we are calling cancer interception. If you have somebody that has a predisposition to get cancer, a syndrome, in my field it's called monoclonal gammopathy by no significance. Everybody who gets myeloma had MGUS. And if you could actually, and we can identify that population, and if you could figure out how to prevent them from going to MGUS to myeloma, the best way to cure cancer is not to get it. And so can you apply that? And can we apply that at a population level? And then all the way through new therapeutics. We have posters back there for the Cancer Drug Development, Discovery and Development Accelerator, which is an infrastructure platform that allows basic scientists and scientists like myself who couldn't develop a drug if it kicked us in the face to say, hey, I got something that I think is going to help these patients. How do I get it into people? And that pipeline is part of the infrastructure that the Cancer Center has built to allow smart people that don't know how to get a drug into a phase 1 study to do that. And adjacent to that is our development of our cellular therapies, GMP platform. We have the Brown Center for Immunotherapy, We have the only cellular GMP facility in the state. And we have and so Huda Salman leads that. She has 4 R01 DoD-funded clinical trials looking at novel therapeutics for malignancies that are currently have no treatment. So that's kind of the platform that we're developing. We believe that I said that when I first interviewed here, there were 3 areas that we wanted to focus on: oncoimmunology, using the immune system to attack cancers; oncotechnology, whether that be computer-based, AI, or engineering; and then onco everywhere. How do we get our cutting-edge advances out into our communities? And so we continue to focus on those areas.
Right. Thank you, Helen. A very compelling overview of the School of Medicine.
Long-winded, you
No,
said.
you're fine. It's very it is a comprehensive cancer center. So, Wade, with regards to pediatric cancers, what are some of the most exciting areas in pediatric cancer? I mean, often this is a really challenging area, but I think with breakthroughs in genomics and being able to understand disease biology at a patient level, there's some probably exciting breakthroughs. And you can talk a little bit about what you're excited about in your area.
Yeah, thank you very much. We certainly use all of the resources that Kelvin mentioned. We do have 2 research groups in our department that are cancer focused. Of pediatric departments nationally, we are a large department. I think we're ranked number 6 nationally of all departments in pediatrics for NIH funding. In our cancer groups, we have investigators who are extraordinarily strong in different types of sarcomas. There's a great interest in sarcomas for obvious reasons. People that have relapses of sarcomas, the mortality is overwhelmingly high for children, adolescents, and adults. We have a real interest in different genetic cancers. We have a group led by Dr. Mark Kelly, who Kelvin mentioned, that's in our department, and is a real leader in helping investigators begin to move molecules forward. We also collaborate broadly with other groups external to our department, particularly the IVRI, where we're sitting. I work very closely with Dr. Palkowitz's group. We're looking to develop a new technology together that will enable us to identify all of the kinases in the genome on a paraffin-embedded slide. So the importance for that, to be able to do that quantitatively, can't be underestimated, particularly for children's rare cancers where the targets aren't incompletely understood. And we're part of several of the major networks, which is particularly important for children's cancers, where there's 400 or 500 cases of cancer per year in the state, not many thousand. So you have to collaborate with other places. We have a SPORE grant through the National Cancer Institute and several other programmatic grants through the Department of Defense and the NCF.
So maybe you could talk a little more about IVRI. I think it's probably a decent number of folks that are here maybe aren't aware or familiar with IVRI. What about IVRI's model is compelling for you to want to collaborate with that group?
Yeah, thank you. So, so they clearly have expertise that we don't. We're heavily a group. I mean, we do have several PhD scientists. We're very biological strengths, I would say, and medical. They have a lot of strengths. A lot of the IVRI investigators were leaders at Lilly or elsewhere before they came here. So they have great strengths in medicinal chemistry, high throughput screening, technologies, and the equipment, et cetera, to be able to do that. So it actually ends up being a very good pairing, because we have the strong disease models, and they have great expertise in drug development, which is what it's an area of tremendous need for children's health.
It's great. I think between IBRI and Mark Kelly's group, we have a lot of awesome translational medicine engines, right, to get assets out of the research laboratory towards the development pathway. So we're really blessed, I think, to have
Completely agree.
depth and breadth of that capability. Brian, you have a lot of industry collaborations. You mentioned one of your assets was acquired by Biogen, and now you've got an asset being taken out through Grannis with John Fogelsong. Maybe talk about how do you get engaged with industry and talk. What is the genesis story for the Biogen example? How did that come about? And then take us a little bit on that journey of how that evolved over time.
Sure. So two different stories, really. The first one, Biogen, is something I did at the University of Kansas before I moved to Notre Dame about 8 years ago. And that was a licensing agreement to Rada Therapeutics, and Rada was acquired about 2 years ago, part for the purpose of our drug. So that was interesting, but the problem was we couldn't follow it along. So we would look at the SEC filing each year to figure out what was going on with our drug. So it was a little frustrating. And so when we got to the point of spinning off another asset, we started Grannis Therapeutics with John Fogelsong back there. And this, we know everything, what's going on, what's not going on. But now it's a money issue, right? Because it's a smaller company, less money. So these are the things that I've learned along the way. They're different struggles. At Notre Dame, it's nice because they have the Idea Center. And the Idea Center will actually help you launch your company, help you find CEOs. They'll assist them building around or two. So I think everything at Notre Dame is set up to move that way. More collaborations on campus would facilitate that. But I would love to learn more about their drug discovery going on at Riley as well. I think there's a lot of potential for us to overlap, because I do think we have one of the strongest drug discovery groups in the country now that we've built in the past 8 years that I think we can compete without anybody. So I'd like to see what else we can do.
Yeah, great. That's one of the powers of these convenings, is to connect dots that weren't otherwise connected. It's awesome. We did some benchmarking 18 months ago, where we looked at different metrics of innovation in the life science ecosystem here in Indiana. One of the areas where Indiana was kind of a bottom quartile in is kind of clinical trials. But I know that there's a lot of investment being made to try to raise our game in that regard. So maybe Kelvin, I'll throw it to you. I know that Brian Schneider was recently appointed as I think an associate dean to focus specifically on making sure that IU has a School of Medicine as a front door for clinical trials. Maybe can you talk a little bit about that effort and what the vision is with regards to increasing clinical trial broadly and maybe specifically about oncology?
So I think that there are a couple parts to that. I think the first part actually is a philosophical part, and it might get to a later question about how do I think we're going to grow this. And I think that the philosophical part is that the interactions that we have we see a lot of patients, right? So our strength is that we have patient populations, and we have the ability to conduct or reach those patient populations across the state. And we are looking for, obviously, both our own science, our science into our patients, as well as pharma partners to move innovative clinical trials forward. But I think the basis of that interaction has to be a purpose-driven one. It can't just be a transactional relationship. And I can share a story from another cancer center who said, well, we had a great interaction with a pharma company that wanted to actually expand, their clinical trial accrual into the community. So we said, all right. So they set up, they went to a community hospital, underserved area. They set up, their clinical trial office, outreach, the whole thing, ran the clinical trial, accrued beautifully, and then when it was done, they pulled it. And there was no clinical trial effort at that hospital after that. And that hurt the system more than actually doing the trial, because then people felt that they were betrayed. That, hey, you were going to do clinical trials, and you did it, and then you left. So I think an important aspect of growing the clinical trial piece, which is very much in the line of the effort that's ongoing now, is to build capacity and structure that gets clinical trials out to our communities. We always say that if you're a cancer patient and you don't have access to a clinical trial, you are getting second-rate medicine. This is not just a matter of clinical trials, this is care. And cancer and the approaches have accelerated so much that phase 1 studies are getting FDA approved in 18 months. And we saw that for CAR T cells and that effort. So we need to be able to build the clinical trial infrastructure, not only downtown, but all over. Part of that is standardizing our clinical trial efforts, having a single front door for all of our partners to go into that now can access not only University Hospital, but Ball, Muncie, everywhere else, and make those trials available for everybody. And then have the infrastructure to actually collect the data that's good data. It's important for our partners, and it's actually, I believe it's immoral to enroll a person on a clinical trial, ask them to risk their lives, and collect crappy data that you can't use. That's wrong. So the entire effort to build that aspect and to allow it to happen across the entire state of Indiana, whether it happens to be actually, IU Health or the Cancer Center or anybody else who wants to do this, we believe that we can build that infrastructure and make a lasting difference for clinical trials across the state.
That's great. I know we're running tight on time, so maybe one last question for all three of you. It's, imagine fast forward, time machine, 2030. Indiana is the destination for world-class, nation-leading cancer care and therapy. What needs to happen between now and 2030 for that vision to materialize? Wade, you want to start? Or Brett? Brian, you want to start?
Go for it. I think we all have the same opinion, I think.
Yeah. So some of the technologies that we're looking to develop will be developed and commercialized. The one with these kinases that I'm talking about, I think this, particularly for children's cancers, which are each individual type is relatively rare, that's going to be transformative. We have spent years working to become integrated into several different national networks through the National Cancer Institute, the Department of Defense, COG, etc., and at the same time to work within the state to provide access to those sorts of trials to pediatric hematologists, oncologists in South Bend and Fort Wayne. The Fort Wayne faculty are now on our faculty. So I see these sorts of opportunities, and then being able to get further access to, like, there's now 100 FDA approved drugs. It was just in Science a couple of weeks ago, that announcement, and then to be able to put patients on very much personalized sort of precision medicine trials, and to have that really be a resource, particularly for kids that have had relapses and where there's very poor outcomes currently.
No?
I'll be short-winded. The state of Indiana needs to invest in cancer research. Right now, the state of Indiana budgets $0 for cancer research, compared to Kentucky, which budgets $20 million a year, the state of Florida, which is over $300 million a year, West Virginia put $20 million into their cancer center, and their cancer center is not even NCI designated. Indiana puts $0 into cancer research. And we are never going to have a robust, a biomedical research environment without the state being at least one of the centers of gravity, and they need to invest in it.
Sounds like a call to action there, right? So every one of you all have a state representative and state senator call that you pay taxes to have represent you, right? Your state senator or state representative, let them know that scientific research and state support thereof is important, right? Right.
Yeah, I'd like to echo what they both said, but I do think it comes down to funding at the end of the day. The state needs to be more involved. But also keep in mind the NIH now is the National Cancer Institute, which funds cancer research, is funding at the 4th percentile level. So it's the lowest it's ever been, and it's almost impossible to get grants nowadays. It's extremely difficult. So finding funding opportunities, we need the state to get more involved, like other states out there as well. So I think there's opportunities, but we're not going to be developing these technologies or these drugs if we don't have funding to support basic research.
Let me just add to Brian's point. Funding is so low that we're going to lose a generation of scientists. A generation of young scientists are going to say, I don't want to do that. There's no money in it. I'm never going to be successful. I'm going to go do something else. And funding comes and goes. But if you lose a generation of scientists, you've lost a generation of scientists. You are not going to get them back. So that's the other very important part of funding for medical research.
And maybe you want to talk a little bit about CPRIT in Texas?
Oh God, CPRIT spends so much. It's Andy Anderson gets like $500 million a year from the state of Texas just to support their. Now they're the #1 cancer center in the country, perhaps in the world. But Texas, which is, I believe, a conservative state, has seen the value of investing in biomedical research, and it's very clear that they're getting an enormous payout. North Carolina calculated their return on investment for state funding of medical research is 12 to 1. So this is not a money-losing proposition.
Awesome, great discussion. Thanks so much for sharing your thoughts. Give a round of applause to these leaders. So we talked a lot about some of the work with regards to therapeutic development and clinical care at our academic research centers. A foundational piece of precision medicine in oncology really is diagnostics. And so I want to bring up to the panel here 3 leaders from various dimensions of the diagnostics industry. Is Dr. Milan Radovich, who's Chief Scientific Officer of CARES, David Lamb, who is a leader with Lilly in their precision medicine group, and Juan Perlaza, who's a leader at Roche in the immunohistochemistry, anatomic pathology group at Roche. So I had the pleasure of working with David and Juan at Roche, so a little bit of a nice homecoming today. So thanks for 3 of you to join. Let's start with the kind of continuum of care, right? So we start with early detection to diagnosis, therapy selection, and therapy monitoring. We'll try to get through all 4. I'm not sure if we're going to get through all 4, but diagnostics has an important role to play in all 4 points of that journey. Let's start with what many think is the holy grail, which is early detection with a non-invasive test. So maybe Milan, maybe you can talk a little bit about what MSET is and the promise of that, and what is the state of the art right now with regards to MSET?
Well, there's probably no hotter topic given there was a controversial Super Bowl commercial just a few weeks ago in this space. And so, as mentioned, when we think about an unbelievable TAM and opportunity to really bend the survival curve, being able to detect cancers at early stages with a non-invasive test has a massive amount of promise. In my personal opinion, probably the biggest bang there in high-risk populations when we think about germline carriers, strong family history, long-term smokers, where screening modalities only pick up 5 types of cancer, but these people are susceptible to other cancers. Smoking alone causes 10 different types of cancers, of which only 1 has a screening modality. And so there's an opportunity to have a really holistic approach with a non-invasive blood test. There's a dream that one day you will go to your doctor's office, you'll get your lipids done, while at the same time you'll get a blood draw for cancer. So the promise is strong. What unfortunately we've seen to date, though, is that the technology still struggles. What we know from a lot of published literature and what we've seen with these multi-cancer early detection tests is that they're really good at picking up people with late-stage cancers, but that doesn't help. We know the sensitivity for early-stage cancers has struggled with some of the methodologies that are going out there. I'm biased. Caris is very passionate about MSED. We just launched, actually put out some of our earliest data at JP Morgan just a couple months ago. And where we see the promise for this is that detecting cancer in the blood is a shots on goal problem. It's trying to find a very small needle in a very large haystack. Because when you take a tube of blood, you extract those DNA molecules, a very infinitesimally small amount of those molecules are actually cancer derived in a patient who has a stage 1 cancer. So you have to go as broad as possible. And so what we're learning in the literature and what we're seeing at Caris as well is that taking broad approaches like whole genome sequencing, whole transcriptome sequencing of the blood at really high depth, taking multi-omics approaches is the way to be able to increase your early stage sensitivity while maintaining a really high specificity. And so one of the things with these tests that a lot of people also don't realize is you don't want to test two that tells a bunch of people they have cancer when they don't, especially in the general population. So you have to maximize both. And we have to get the general population also familiar with this concept of PPV, which is not a concept that most people are very familiar with when you're dealing with these sort of population-based tests. So a lot of promise, a lot of work to do, but to be honest, it has an opportunity to really be a game changer.
But PPV, positive predictive value. If a test says that something's there, it actually is there.
Exactly.
Right?
Exactly.
Great. And then with regards to, there's recent, I think, legislation around the coverage of MSED. Maybe you want to talk about that as well to increase patient access to tests as well.
Are we recording? Yeah. It's a massive catch-22. So what the legislation is stipulating is one, you have to have FDA approval, which I love the FDA, and I actually 100% agree with FDA regulating LDTs. We see a lot of bad actors out there, so I want to be really clear. The reimbursement is the tough part because the legislation kind of basically tied the reimbursement to Cologuard, which is around $500 or so. And the issue there, the catch-22, is that, like I said, it's a needle and haystack problem. So to get maximal early stage sensitivity, you have to apply maximal approaches. And those maximal approaches, with current sequencing costs, even though they're going down, there's no test that can achieve that level of sensitivity at a cost of $500. So it actually disincentivizes the system. And that's why you're seeing a lot of self-pay approaches to these early detection tests. Now, all that being said, my colleagues here at Roche are developing a brand new sequencer that I think is going to be a game changer. Positive doors. But anyway, there's others. I said it, you're right. There's Roche and others out there who are developing sequencing platforms that are going to bring the cost of sequencing down. But you can't have your cake and eat it too. If you want maximal sensitivity, you've got to take maximal approaches. Maximal approaches require the most cutting edge technologies. And so I think, as any typical thing, new technologies, every time they come out, they come at a higher price point, but they will continue to go down as technologies get more efficient.
So we covered broadly early diagnosis through a multi-cancer early detection non-invasive test. Let's continue on the continuum here in terms of, positive signal in MSED. Next step would be, let's talk about role immunohistochemistry plays or anatomic pathology plays with regards to cancer diagnostic. What is next frontier with regards to that area?
Yeah, absolutely. And just for those that may not know, right up there in 96 and A, we have one of the regional offices for Roche Diagnostics. And it's just part of the Roche group. So Roche Diagnostics, a big player in the diagnostic world. From an immunohistochemistry perspective, we own about 50% of the market. So it's a flip of a coin if your biopsy is going to go through a Roche instrument. We are in the market of developing not just the reagents and antibodies, but also the instrumentation for this type of testing. So when there is a diagnosis, you have to do that level of molecular profiling, and we have several types of methodologies that we follow, right? Whether it is immunohistochemistry or polymerase chain reaction or PCR, next generation sequencing, or even ISH, which is in situ hybridization. So there's several technologies that we manage, but there is, just to kind of simplify, there's a level of additional testing that needs to happen for that patient sample to ensure that we have the proper treatment pathway and not waste any time for that patient because time is of the essence. And then, of course, consequently, you use some of the same technologies for monitoring.
And I think there's quite a bit of digital pathology now being applied, right, where you are imaging a slide and staining and being able to more quantitatively assess that particular sample. Maybe Juan and then maybe David, love to hear your perspective on digital pathology.
Yeah, I think if I look at the continuum of cancer, we started with targeted therapy, then went to immunotherapy, and now there's been a boom with the antibody drug conjugates. So in cancer, and even Roche, we've been working with pharmaceutical companies for a long time. And the new thing is AI, and what is AI doing? We actually have a new division that has stood up called Roche Informatics or Information Solutions. And we're applying AI in everything we do. As a matter of fact, it is now launched on a research use only, and I believe Caris is our first customer. But what we're doing is we're coming out with the technology in partnership with pharma companies to see more than what a pathologist can see. And the pathologist still needs to sign off the case, but to give you a glimpse, we have this new technology or creating antibodies as well as algorithms using proprietary technology called QCS or quantitative continuous scoring, also known as NMR, normalized membrane ratios. And you have algorithms analyzing all the cells in a piece of tissue and giving you a ratio. And I mean, the last one I saw this morning, the system within less than 10 seconds analyzed over 90,000 cells. And it's able to give you a ratio, and that ratio is going to be the new language in the future. It's already revolutionizing clinical trials, speeding up a lot of things that before maybe have failed. And there is a current clinical trial from AstraZeneca using this, and we just launched the IVD here in January, using that technology, awaiting for results of that clinical trial to launch the companion diagnostics associated with it. And that would be TROP 2.
Super exciting. We kind of began then touched on therapy selection with companion diagnostics. David, from a Lilly perspective, how are you guys integrating diagnostics in terms of both your therapeutic development, but also driving increased access out into the community?
Well, let me also just say to start, it's such a pleasure to be here with these esteemed panelists and great discussion so far today. So thinking about this question, I just had to mention I was just at ACLA in Washington, D.C., and they had Dr. Elias Zerhouni, former NIH director, speaking, talking about his new book, and he used a quote that I thought was excellent. He said that diagnostics is the GPS of healthcare, and it's really guiding patients where they need to go. I thought that was excellent. So any question about diagnostics, I had to mention it. In the industry, I'll speak broadly, where diagnostics used to be as kind of an afterthought to clinical development or as an adjunct, a button on, you got to get your companion diagnostic. Where I see it now is much more sophisticated, much earlier. You have teams that are being deployed very early for biomarker development, partner identification, to understand which are the right partners for companion diagnostics development, who has the experience from a regulatory perspective, who has the ubiquity or reach into the market to reach the most patients. So quite an evolution, I think, over the last 10 years from something you kind of do at the very end of the cycle to the beginning. I mean, a great example, and it's been maybe 20 years now, and if I'm not mixing up my facts, I believe it was gefitinib was approved in an all-comer population, and then it was subsequent to its market approval, we found out that actually this only works in EGFR mutated patients. So I think pharma is what I've seen across the industry really excited about the integration of diagnostics into the development life cycle. It's making trials faster, more cost effective, and hopefully getting the right medicine to the right patient at the right time.
Increasingly, regulators and payers are looking for that, right? In terms of making sure therapeutic developers are taking a biomarker-informed approach. I know there's some partnerships between Lilly and Roche in this area. If you guys, I don't know, Juan, if you want to talk about a collaboration that maybe you can talk about publicly in that realm.
Yeah, like I said, especially in oncology, we've been working with pharma companies for 2 decades at least, or at least as I know. I'm sure it's more than that. But we've had several commercializations. I think one that I really like to talk about is FOLR1, folate receptor alpha 1, with a company named Immunogen. AbbVie bought Immunogen, and it's for ovarian cancer. There hasn't been innovation in ovarian cancer for a long time, and this antibody that we built, scaled and commercialized across the world for Immunogen at the time, and now for AbbVie, is being used left and right in many other disease states, as a matter of fact. But for ovarian cancer, we were able to get patients that or women that had their samples archived and bring it back into the tail and say, we have a treatment for you. Huge success in ovarian cancer and for women out there with that type of disease.
Yeah, it's super compelling. Milan, I know Caris also plays heavily in the therapy selection space. We want to talk about the approach that you all take with regards to that therapy selection and collaboration with pharma companies.
Yeah, absolutely. And I had the pleasure of being on both sides. I'm a former alumni of the IU Simon Cancer Center, co-leading the precision genomics program there, where we use Caris testing as well. So I've been on both sides. Caris has always taken the stance that more information is better. And so we standardized on doing whole exome and transcriptome sequencing on every patient since 2019. It is the now FDA-approved platform as well. And we do it for 2 reasons. One is we want to leave no stone unturned to identify a drug or a clinical trial for a patient. The vast majority of patients we sequence are refractory and looking for new options. We know new biomarkers and new drugs come out in the clinical trial every single week, and we don't want to miss it. We want to provide that peace of mind that says, look, if there's a drug out there, we're going to find it. And then while our number one goal is the patient today, what we also know is we've been amassing this huge data set to help the patient tomorrow. So now over 1 million patients sequenced, we make this data completely freely available to our academic institutions, including IU. And many others. And then we work very closely with pharma. And where we help with pharma is in a variety of areas. One is identifying patients. Another one is creating predictive biomarkers, digital pathology. As you know, we're very intricate with the TROP2 QCS as well. But I think where the future is going is there's been this paradigm in precision oncology that is 1 mutation equals 1 drug. And that has occurred since the days of Gleevec with BCR-ABL and continues to be the mainstay. Name your drug. But what happens is, even with many of these targeted agents, the response rates are still 30 to 40%. And what we've come to learn is that with multi-omics approaches, that cancers, they work in networks and pathways that you can create much more robust multi-gene signatures that are much more predictive, both at the RNA level, but also with digital pathology. And where the future is going, and when we're having these discussions now, is we're finally gotten to the point where we're evolving the paradigm. We say, look, yeah, you may be 30% response rate with your single agent, but we can get you a 90% response rate with multi-gene signature. And that's kind of where we're going now as a future in our support of pharma.
Combination therapies approach, right?
Combination therapies approaches as well, personalized vaccine approaches, bispecifics, and many others.
So let's continue to move on to the paradigm or through the continuum of care after therapy selection, and then after that is kind of monitoring, right? Minimal residual disease monitoring, looking for recurrence for patients. Big area of growth. David, how's Lilly thinking about the impact of MRD with regards to how it impacts how you go to market with your drug therapies?
Yeah, I think that, just from a historical perspective, I think MRD is really interesting because it's been in the clinical toolkit in hematologic malignancies for quite some time, and now with the realization that solid tumors are kicking cell-free DNA and circulating tumor cells into circulation, you can use a tool from one area in another, and I think that's been a really interesting development. So pharma companies, I'll speak kind of broadly here. I've seen 2 trends. Number one is using MRD as a surrogate outcome. Similar to pathologic complete response or other surrogate outcomes, it could be a really helpful surrogate outcome in adjuvant studies where you're trying to assess an early signal of patient response. I think the other area that this is being really helpful, and actually Dr. Lee, I'm embarrassed to even mention this with an expert in the crowd with Dr. Lee here, but if I'm remembering right, it was the MIDAS study from ASCO this last year where I believe they showed in multiple myeloma that MRD negative patients were able to be spared on autologous stem cell replacement and really have no negative outcomes. They were able to be saved the opportunity or save that additional treatment. And so I think having MRD as a new window into what the disease is doing, so that you can either escalate or de-escalate treatment, ultimately getting back to this point that we're talking about is getting the patients the right treatment if they need treatment at all at the right time.
Well, with Kara's thinking about MRDs, other than early detection, about the largest other TAM available to diagnostics companies. Maybe talk about your efforts to develop a solution for MRD.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, MRD is the fastest highway of matriculation molecular profiling to the early disease course. I mean, period. I mean, I think it's where you're going to see the largest evolution of molecular profiling in stage 1 through 3 disease. And for a very simple fact, patients who are MRD positive after definitive therapy are extremely high risk of relapse. It is more prognostic than every clinical parameter. So tumor size, nodal status, age, grade, race, all of it is considerably more prognostic. And the promise there is patients who are MRD positive could potentially be spared a overt clinical relapse by escalating therapy, and there's a lot of trials in there. But if you ask me, the biggest promise of MRD is actually the negative predictive value. It's actually sparing adjuvant therapy for patients who don't need it because their cancer has been cured by either neoadjuvant therapy, surgery, radiation. It's going to be where we see the biggest savings to the healthcare system, savings of sometimes debilitating toxicities. And so it's where there's really a lot of promise. And so we, like others, are invested heavily in MRD, particularly tumor-informed approaches where we sequence the tumor, we identify numerous trackers in that tumor sample and then look for those in the blood using this very broad shots on goal approach to be able to detect the most minuscule micrometastatic disease possible.
Super exciting. Any other exciting thing in the diagnostic space you guys want to add before we transition to the next speaker?
Yeah, no, real quick, I think we're very excited about all of the development in MRD. We're coming out with a new sequencer later this summer, and I think that's definitely applications that we'll look in the future.
Yeah, and I think I'll just punctuate something that Juan said earlier. He's really the expert on digital and computational pathology, but from a pharma perspective, it's very interesting. I think he noted the ability to observe biomarkers where no human could perceive them before. And I think even in moving out of discovery and development into clinical practice, having your best practice be your normal practice and how these slides are evaluated, because you've seen, I think actually a lot of this come out of the partnership with Roche and AstraZeneca, looking at inter-pathologist variability of assessing HER2 expression. Pathology is a very difficult field, and in some respects it is artisanal still. And I think this is exciting to kind of bring heightened equity in how patients are diagnosed.
I'll end off with saying a lot of people say early detection is the holy grail. In my personal opinion, it's prevention. And I think at the end of the day, if you ask me what's probably the most exciting when I scan the biotech landscape, well, I'm a big fan of therapeutics, by the way, and so I really am. It's us cataloging this massive amount of genomic data across so many tumors, applying really cutting-edge artificial intelligence techniques, and asking the question, what are the shared features that we can create prevention methodologies for, will at the end of the day probably bend the survival curve more. So let's hope all this diagnostics gets translated into that.
Absolutely. What a great way to end that promise. So let's thank all of our panelists here for giving us the landscape perspective. So really a great overview of the state of the art with regard to precision medicine and the role that diagnostics is playing with regard to ushering this exciting era of precision medicine oncology. But the most important that I talked about earlier is really the patient story and the patient journey. So with that, I'm going to invite a great partner of ours, Lake Wooten, to walk us through a patient interview. So Lake.
I'm just doing the introduction.
Okay.
So Chad and Mike and Jim, come on up. Thanks, gentlemen. So I'm very excited for this next segment because it is the patient's story. I work in manufacturing, and so this really is a unique opportunity. I'm also an ambassador for the Oncidium Foundation, which is a patient-focused organization that is focused on radioligand therapies. If you're interested in more of the patient side, feel free to reach out to me or follow up after the event. But Jim, thank you very much for coming, and thank you to Chad and Mike for arranging this. I'll introduce you guys real quick and let you get on with it. Dr. Michael Large is from South Bend, and he was trained as a urologic oncologist in Indianapolis, or he returned to Indianapolis to become a urologic oncologist after he received training at Harvard, IU, and the University of Chicago, and he has dedicated his career to urologic cancer. Chad Reichard is a friend of mine, and he is also a urologic oncologist, probably with slightly different training, but he completed his residency at Cleveland Clinic and advanced training at MD Anderson down in Houston. You didn't mention the University of Michigan. He cares for patients with a variety of genitourinary malignancies with a focus on prostate and bladder cancer. Both Doctors Large and Reichard practice at Urology of Indiana, which is focused on providing quality, cost-effective, and comprehensive urologic care within Indiana and throughout the Midwest. Patients with advanced prostate cancer that come to the Urology of Indiana practice receive direct access to both the latest standard of care as well as cutting-edge advances in medical technology and pharmaceutical development because they have a clinical trials program. So thank you both for coming here, and thank you especially to Jim for coming and sharing your story.
Thanks to the symposium for inviting us. I am a Hoosier through and through, born in South Bend and returned to South Bend. My wife is also from Fort Wayne. I met Chad Reichard when he was my resident at Chicago, and fortunately we were able to join forces and practice here in Indiana. This is a really unique opportunity. I'm so proud to be here with Jim. I can't even really put it into words. This is a beautiful thing. I met Jim probably 5-6 years ago, but he was well into his cancer journey. And so we'll start back at the beginning. At that time, you were with a different urologist when you were diagnosed. Tell me a little bit about that and what you remember from those times.
I've in preparation for this, I kind of went back over the chronology, and you kind of want to get done with things and forget about them, and so it's taken a little bit of time to go back. But I was diagnosed in 2005, and I had prostatectomy in 2006, and and some follow-up radiation when my PSA started to climb again, and toward the end of 2006 and 2007. In 2008, I had Dr. Lieger, my radiologist, write me a prescription for a new road bicycle so that my wife would allow me to buy that. And he framed it as as an important aspect of my cancer treatment, and it turned out to be just that. I lose track. I had infusion therapy. I've had several oral therapies, but most recently I had systemic chemotherapy, and then after that Pluvicto. And so I've been through the mill, and I've had really good care, good people, and so I'm happy to be here too, and on this side of the sod.
Chad and I will just, when we started, advanced prostate cancer patients were not sitting here 21 years after diagnosis. This has happened in my lifetime. Most of the drugs that Jim is on, or has been on, did not exist when we were in medical school. So I graduated from IU in 2005. Chad, when did you graduate from Michigan?
2007.
Yeah, so when we came into practice, a lot of the older urologists preferentially directed these patients to the younger guys because this wasn't something that was educated in medical school. It was so novel. So Jim, when you were told that your cancer recurred, so you had surgery, then you needed radiation, walk us through kind of your thoughts at that time and what direction you were going to take.
Characteristically, I have responded to bad news with a sense of resignation. I try to stop for a moment, I stall for time, and I try to gather additional information and consultation before making decisions. Thankfully, that's kind of the way Urology of Indiana has handled me too, with a lot of good information and people to talk to, and time to consider. But I was pretty discouraged. My son, about that time, he had completed an Ironman, and I was a Sherpa at that event, and he pulled me off to the side at some point. He said, "Dad, you can't spend the rest of your life eating, watching TV, and waiting to die." He said, "You need to do something." And so I said, okay, and I started signing up for short triathlons, super sprints, and also aqua bike competitions where they cut the running out. You can do a little longer bike and swim without having to dive on the bricks. And if you look at my body type, you know that I'm not a fleet of foot individual, never have been. But what happened was that I began to surround myself in the cycling and in the triathlon. I began to surround myself with people who were generally healthy and happy and encouraging. I've had a lot of people drop me like a bad habit. I've been in a lot of people's dust. I've never had one person tell me, "Hey, old buzzard, get off the track. You know, what are you doing out here? Who are you kidding?" Everybody passes me, stops for a second, and says, "You're gonna make it. You're doing good. And go for it." You know, those cliches, but they mean a lot when you're struggling. And so surrounding myself with that community really, really helped me. My wife is an aneurysm survivor, and she was uncomfortable with riding a bicycle on her own. So for us to share cycling together, we bought a tandem bicycle, which is also called a divorce machine. And if you ride one for a while, you'll understand why it's called that. But we mastered that. We've ridden the Golden Gate Bridge down into Sausalito and had some of the best scallops I've ever had in my life. We rode around Penobscot Bay. We've been on the Gitchigami Trail along Superior's North Shore, and all of that has brought us closer together. And she's really walked through this cancer journey with me.
Chad, when you listen to somebody like Jim talk about how active he is with our prostate cancer patients, speak to that aspect of their care and how important that is with some of the medications that these patients are on.
Absolutely. I mean, just hearing you talk, Jim, just reinforces the point that we tell our patients how important weight bearing exercise is, just to fight through the negative side effects of the hormonal manipulations we put you through and so forth. And just from a psychological aspect, you can tell how much that's meant to you to probably helps just as much as any medical therapy we're putting you through as well, maybe even more so. So I think it goes without saying that you're sitting here as an example, and really I wish I could have that on video to show every single one of my patients as kind of an example of what we hope that they would be able to accomplish during treatment as well. I think, at some point you mentioned you've been through a lot of lines of therapies, and then eventually it came to, talking about Pluvicto was put on the list of options. In your own words, what was it that you understood about what it was supposed to do? How do you feel it was explained to you? If you could tell us a little bit about that.
It's hard to approach that clean because I was coming off of the systemic chemotherapy, which really hurt me. I still can't feel my feet hardly. I can't play guitar or bass anymore. And I pretty much closed all of the doors that I'd been going through to try to handle this. So it basically took a fat and happy 70-year-old guy and turned me into a 90-year-old guy. And I'm fighting back. I'm about 80 now, and hope to get back to 74, which is where I'm supposed to be right now. Dr. Large explained Pluvicto in terms of it's the way that it works, etc. He seemed optimistic about that, and also said that it would probably be easier on me, side effects wise, than the chemotherapy had been, and that turned out to be the case. I did, I didn't enjoy it. I mean, the crazy syringe thing looks like a caulking gun. And you kind of wonder, are they going to shove all of that in me? And it turned out there's just a little one inside that goes in there. So that was good. Also, there was some guy standing around in khakis, and he introduced himself as a physicist. And that worried me too. I thought they were going to launch me into space or something. But anyway, my treatment there was well done, and I was cared for. Shuttled out the back door. Had to do some staying away from my wife and kids and grandkids and such for periods of time. I've got another quick story. You want me to tell that now?
Yeah, so Jim and I share a lot of the same hobbies. I had to dig deep in the tie rack to find my fish tie. Jim and I are both musicians. I play the piano. He wrote a book about his fishing trips, which he published, and patients will usually sign the inside. He says, "Love you, Doc. Keep playing that piano, Jim Craig." the relationship that you have with a patient has a lot of ups and downs in cancer care. And to be sitting here this long into the therapy, some of the ups are phenomenal. And right now, we're definitely riding one of those. I'm sitting there with Jim. He wants to go to Canada to stoke the fishing trip back up. And he's just going through Pluvicto. And I'm going through my mind, and I think that it's a go. And Jim's wife, Linda, who's ultimately the one in charge of all of us and what we do, she kind of agreed. And so Jim goes on his fishing trip. I'm waiting for the photos, and he comes back and he starts telling me a marvelous story at the border. So I'll take it from there.
Coming off of some really good fishing, northern pike, walleye, smallies, had a lot of success. And the trip up was no problem, but the trip back had a little bit of a hitch. We crossed the border, Pigeon River, and stopped at the Border Patrol building there to show them our passports. The guard collected the passports and asked us the usual questions, and he asked one I wasn't looking for. He said, did any of you receive medical treatment while you were in Canada? And we all said no. And he looked askance at us, and he said, well, do you have like an old barometer or compass or something like that? And he said, no. He said, won't you all just pull up here in that parking spot there and stay in the vehicle? Not exactly what you want to hear from the Border Patrol, right? And so we were wondering what's up. And he came out with another guy, and they had a handheld, turned out to be a Geiger counter. I'd seen that at in the Pluvicto treatment, but he had one there. Had us all line up and scanned my son-in-law, nothing. Scanned my brother-in-law, nothing. Scanned me and lit up like a Christmas tree. And so he said, well, we're going to need to detain you until we check your story. Because by that time, I'd awakened to what he had picked up. And it was Sunday. I don't know who they talked to. I didn't ask. I really didn't want to know exactly. But they apparently called whoever was on call at urology and got enough information to say that my story was true of us being treated with a radioactive substance, and they told me to get a letter next time I come across the border. So I said, okay. Now, Dr. Large found humor in the story when I told him. He said, I'm sorry about that cavity search. I didn't have a cavity search. And then when I got my next Pluvicto treatment, the nurses were laughing. And the one lady said, are you Mike from Breaking Bad? I didn't even know who that was. I came out. But, I said, no. She said, well, what was it like in Stir? And I said, I wasn't in Stir. They just detained us for a little while. But the funniest thing, I don't know if I told you this, the funniest thing was my ophthalmologist, who was dealing with a retina problem I developed as a part of my chemotherapy. He looked at me, listened to the story, and he said, dude, you're Lex Luthor.
So, at the end of the day, Chad and I go home and I think I have the best job in the world. I've timed that job pretty well. I mean, with robotics, it's enabled us to do phenomenal surgery here in the state of Indiana. We have incredibly high volume dedicated programs. Presently, I'm the head of urologic oncology over at MD Anderson Community. Chad leads our research department at Urology of Indiana. We have about 40 trials at MD Anderson Community. Chad, you can speak to kind of what's going on at urology.
Yeah, we also have many clinical trials open. We take care of a large number of prostate cancer patients, so about 3,000 under active management currently. About 25 to 30 patients a year treated with Pluvicto. So, really just happy to be in the community and providing kind of the front lines of cancer care to make it accessible to patients like Jim. So it's exciting times for sure.
Yeah. If we could wrap it up, Jim, what advice do you have for patients, families, communities who are approaching cancer, a new diagnosis, maybe a recurrent diagnosis? What have you gleaned from your experience that you would provide to others for support?
I turn back to my experience originally as a pastor, and you always have to have 3 points in that sermon. The first message I would give to patients is to rejuvenate, to do, and if you can't do, to dwell on things that make you feel young again. I don't know what you did when you were kids, where you grew up and such, but when you're in trouble, it's a really good idea to rejuvenate. It's a good idea to do those things. And for me, cycling, swimming, tent camping, those kinds of things make me feel like a kid again. And even though age and treatment is kind of closing the doors on some of those things, I can still think about those. Right now I volunteer for Racemaker Productions. They run short tries, and they let me stand in the transition area and direct people in and out properly, help people get their stuff set up so that they can function well. And so I'd say rejuvenate. I'd say to families to facilitate that rejuvenation. And to those of you who are doing the research and the marketing and the manufacturing and the marketing and the administration of these things, I'd say generate research, generate products, generate hope for people. And I think together we're going to make it.
Thank you all very much. And to Jim.
All right, thanks guys very much. Next up is Mike Bolander. He's going to lead a panel about radiopharmaceutical manufacturing. As mentioned earlier, Indiana is the radiopharmaceutical capital of the world, and Pluvicto, among many other products, are manufactured here for commercial and for clinical trials. So there's a lot of exciting work coming out of Indiana. And Mike is a wonderful ambassador for the state and for this particular field too. So,
yeah, thank you. Thanks, Lee. That was very kind. Man, what a story. It's always cool when you can connect what a lot of us do on a daily basis to what actually matters, right? And why we're doing it. So next panel, I'm going to ask them to come up. We got Matt Baca, who is the site head of operations here locally for Novartis, actually delivering the medication that we were just talking about. David Trump at SpectronRx, who is their chief radiochemist. And Sumit Verma, my friend, who is CEO at Tag One and also co-founder of Orchestra Life Sciences. So first, what I'd like for you guys to do is maybe give a little bit of background on yourselves, a little bit more than what I've provided and what you do on a daily basis. But the question I'd really like to understand or have answered is, we just heard a tremendous story from Jim and his clinicians. How does what you do on a daily basis, because I know each of you represent a little bit of a different perspective in sort of this radio pharma world. How does what you do on a daily basis connect to the story and what really stood out to you in Jim's story? That makes sense. And Matt, if you want to start.
Again, my name is Matthew Baca, and I am the head of site operations at Vartis's radioligand therapy manufacturing site here in Indianapolis. So largely what my team is responsible for doing is turning what we call this possibility of this whole radioligand therapy science into dependability and reliability. There's a lot of complexities that goes into what it is that we do, and I think I've best heard it described as you're operating and trying to get a melting ice cube through the desert in a matter of hours, and it's exactly what it is. We're constantly taking into consideration time as we operate throughout our day-to-day basis, and we're moving as one holistic unit in trying to do that because we're ultimately trying to get these therapies to where they need to be across the United States, across the globe, in a very short time frame. So, in hearing the story that Jim was able to tell, one, it resonates pretty deep. Seeing the impact that something like this can happen on people, and it's more than just a name. It's more than just a batch number. It's more than just a dose that you're making. Like it's an actual human being that's being impacted by this. And for me, I think him telling his fishing story, it really hit home for me. I'm a big fisherman, and so it made it that much more human. And that's ultimately what we talk about every single day. At our facility, we like to say that what we're creating is hope. What we're creating is more precious memories for the people that were being treated. So, it hits home.
That's awesome. And directly impacted, right? I mean, that was your product, your patient. So that's cool. Suman, I'd love to hear your thought.
Yeah, sure. First and foremost, I'm the co-founder of Orchestra Life Sciences, a company that's heavily focused as a technically advisory group to help advance therapies, especially in cancer and rare disease. So our focus has been very similar to Matt, to bring these therapies sooner than possible. So that's our focus. And then I also run a company called Tag One. That's a premier radioisotope supplier for targeted alpha therapies. We're working very focused on lead-212, which is one of the key radionuclides useful for developing some of these radioligands that we're talking about today. One of the key things that I heard from Jim's story, one is just the power of what everyone's done today. Just being able to sit with a patient that's been treated is just phenomenal. But at the same time, it's also a reminder of their journey. When you heard Chad and team talk about how many different modalities they had to go through, typically from a standard of care, you're starting off with at least one level of chemotherapy, some type of immunotherapy, monoclonal antibodies, anti-PD-1s, cell and gene therapy, then you get to radioligand therapy in many cases. And you just think about that, is that the focus has been today more towards prolonging a cancer patient's life. And that is phenomenal what we've seen today from Jim. But wouldn't it be better to be at that curative level and be right at the standard of care? And Pluvicto is a great example of how today it's been brought to the standard of care, unlike many other products. So it's clear to us that there's, listening to Jim's story again, that there's such a big journey ahead of us, not just to treat prostate cancer, but all forms of solid tumors are still out there that require treatments. And so much work has to be done, beginning at the research level, as Dr. Lee mentioned, all the way to the manufacturing steps. And ultimately, as Matt touched on it, supplying and delivering some of these radioligand therapies, which on its own is a very complex operation.
Yeah, really well said. David, your perspective, I'd love to hear it.
Sure. So David Trump, I'm the Senior Vice President for Research and Development at FrameWORX. And I've been in this field for about 30 years, and been very happy in recent years to be working on some of the therapeutic efforts, some of the new radionuclides that are coming online. So as R&D, our team helps develop the new therapeutics that are going to be coming. And so stories like what we just heard from Jim, it's very inspirational to my team. SpectronRx is a company that's a CDMO. So we produce radionuclides. We also procure radionuclides. We have clients that come to us with targeting compounds. And so we take those radionuclides, And then our R&D team, runs that through an R&D process to get that into a radiopharmaceutical suitable for administration. And then the company sends that out globally at this point, and then helps support whatever regulatory efforts are there or clinical efforts as need be.
That's great. What stood out to me from what we heard from Jim was the progression of therapies that he had to go through. And unfortunately, it sounded like the Pluvicto was a lot less toxic or taxing on him and his system than some of the more traditional systemic chemotherapies. And my wife over 20 years ago went through something like that, and I can really resonates with me with the loss of the peripheral neuropathies. And when you finally get to something like a Taxol, they're like, oh, don't worry, this one's not so bad, right? And so it would be really, I think it's interesting, the sooner we can move some of these perhaps less taxing therapies earlier. I'm curious, so Indiana, we mentioned earlier, radiopharmaceutical capital of the world, we've got Novartis, you doing what you're doing, moving those, ice cubes through the desert as quickly as possible. The work at Spectron RX, you certainly see a lot of different ecosystems. I'm curious from your perspectives, based on the various things we've got, everything from manufacturing isotopes through manufacturing finished product to logistics to treatment of patients that we were just talking about, what is it that Indiana seems to have a little bit of a special sauce or something that we do uniquely that maybe other bioclusters aren't necessarily doing? What, from your perspectives, maybe we'll start in reverse order this time, David, with you, not to put you on the spot, but what is it that we do uniquely well here that maybe isn't done as well or isn't possible in other places from your perspective and what you do?
From my perspective, it's the people.
Yeah.
It's absolutely the people. People drive this, people are innovative, people get determined to be successful, and it starts and ends with that as far as I'm concerned. So what makes Indiana unique to me, this is my original home as well, and I love this state. But there's a lot of chemists, there's a lot of pharmacists, there's a lot of engineering, there's a lot of fabricators, and all the people that are needed from A to Z to make this process work. And equally important is these folks, the different places that we look for people, they're trained well as teams, and that is very helpful because all of this takes just a tremendous amount of teamwork and that ability just to work with other people, see a common vision, and just come in every day, even when some of the days are harder than others, or maybe we had some setbacks. You get up the next day and you get in there because of people like Jim, and so for me, it's definitely the people.
Yeah, very good. Your perspective.
Sure. Just kind of picking up from David, the element of people, I'm reminded of Dr. Phil Lowe as you think about him and his journey. Going from translational science all the way to a commercial product is not something easy to do in many communities, let alone one person being able to do all of it. That speaks to the people side that David has touched upon. And one thing that Indiana does really well is being able to correlate and collate both at the same time to support some of these initiatives. As I put some of these pieces together, when hearing Jim's story and listening to how many people are connected here today is just an example of that. For Jim and having taken Pluvicto, he's in the same room with Matt today, who has a whole team making these drug products here. These are the folks who are making Pluvicto right here in Indianapolis. And David and his team are focused on the next set of radioisotopes that can be supporting the further treatment of prostate cancer that may not work sometimes with Pluvicto, just given the nature of it. So when you start seeing all this ecosystem being connected, you know why Indiana is special, because they've connected the dots. They're able to take translational science all the way to commercialization and take benefit of this ecosystem community that has everything in place here. And that to me is a big difference that makes Indiana special from a biocluster perspective.
That's special. Thank you for sharing that. Matt, your thoughts?
Yep. So I completely agree and echo it. It's this special convergence of strengths. So within the Indiana area, you have proximity to, it's something like 35 to 40% of major cancer research centers. You have universities with pipelines and research and development, great engineering. You also have just this manufacturing DNA that is inherent to the Midwest, and in particular Indiana, that there's something to be said for. It's just when you get people who all can come together. For example, I have an engineer who's a world-class design engineer that's working on robotics for us, as well as a younger engineer who grew up keeping the family tractor running with baling wire. Right, like that's a special ingredient in creating something that can create dependable and reliable manufacturing culture, which ultimately gets these drug products where they need to be in a timely manner and creates that reliability that is necessary in this field.
Very, very salient point. All right, so staying with you, Matthew. Talk to me a little bit about, every time I drive by the airport, you guys are growing, like expanding, it's crazy. And you're head of site operations. In my mind, when I hear operations, I think all the headaches that everybody has to deal with. What are the challenges? What are the problems that you're dealing with most in your day-to-day job?
Yep, I think first and foremost, our biggest and number one priority is taking the complexity that we deal with day in and day out and making it absolutely transparent to the patient. These radioisotopes have a half-life that is a challenge from a manufacturing perspective, and it requires us to stay in lockstep as a manufacturing unit. We are making, testing, releasing these products in a matter of hours. And on top of that, again, depending on where these things are going, you're looking at a very complex logistical setup that has to be reliable. And so ultimately it comes down to, is your system dependable? Is it reliable? Is it resilient? And that you ensure that you don't pass on that complexity, those problems to the patient, because ultimately what we're trying to do is be a part of the patient care. We are trying to make sure that these challenges that come with any sort of manufacturing ultimately don't trickle down to where they need to be.
Yeah, and I think, as you've described previously and even today, the manufacturing that you're doing is pretty much just-in-time inventory stuff, right? I mean, you're trying to manufacture this. Sometimes, if I understand right, you back into the manufacturing time from when the patient's administration time is. And that requires, as we've talked about before, like a crazy, you've got to have a crazy well-built operation and then a lot of logistics to be able to support that. Can you talk to us a little bit about what are the critical things that enable that delivery, and what are some things that Indiana either needs to continue to maintain or maybe build support-wise, especially from a logistical perspective, I would think, to be able to support what you guys are doing to make sure that patients like Jim get their doses?
So I think really what Indiana needs to continue to do, we'll start there, is continue to support building a logistics network specific for these type of products, for these type of therapies. It's no surprise we're next to the airport, and that was purposeful. We want to be where the transportation hubs are in order for us to get these products where they need to be in a timely manner. And so when you think about that, when you think about how we can continue to build out that infrastructure for logistics, it starts there. It starts with building out logistical teams who are specializing in this type of transportation. I think another thing, as far as just what we are doing in terms of logistics, is continuing to grow with the logistics industry in general. So, it's funny to me how we can track our Uber Eats on an app, right? And the same necessarily can't be said for some of our medical products. And so as we grow, as we start to build out, that's one of the things that we're just trying to do on a day-to-day basis is like, how do we keep evolving with what the technology is bringing to us on a day-to-day basis? How do we integrate AI into our lane mapping? How do we look for opportunities to continue to meet the patient where they're at? So I think that's just one of the aspects we're taking into consideration.
Yeah, you're right. As soon as you said the Uber Eats, I'm thinking about, you can track and know right when to go to your front door to get your food, right? It's amazing. So, David, I'd love to ask you, because I know you deal with a lot of similar challenges logistics-wise, but also I think you guys, deal a lot with how you move from pilot scale to full-scale manufacturing. Can you talk to us about some of the challenges that you and your team and your organization are working through with that?
Sure. I think one of the more recent challenges is we're at this stage. We have, say, 30 to 40 different projects that we're working on, radio labeling pharmaceuticals to try to get them ready to go. And we have people who are really good at producing radionuclides, and we have people who are really good at doing some of the radio labeling, some that are really good at formulation-related work, logistics, and all. We have people who make hot cells and enclosures, clean rooms, and build facilities. And what we see is, and it's kind of a more recent undertaking for me, is to figure out how you get all these people to work in unison. They're all very siloed, they're all really good at what they do, they're very passionate and about what they do and successful. It's just that sometimes in between those different steps, it becomes a challenge. And so we're working hard to bring in some more project management and more the right kinds of people who understand this, which again, back to people, it is the hardest thing. I mean, how do you bring in someone and say, okay, here's radiopharmaceutical, here's radioactivity, here's the drug part, here's the facility part, how do you do that? It's a big challenge. So, we have been fortunate. We have a few people who we do have in some of these roles, and it's something we're working very hard on, for sure. Logistics, and we're also shipping widely and seeing some of the different issues that come up, especially with some of the things around the world that are happening. It makes flights. We're all tracking flights. We all have Plan A, Plan B, Plan C. Everybody in between. You're prepared for who's receiving this, where it has to go from there. But again, it does come back to people. We have people that just sit and watch GPS screens all day, right, all night. And they're watching these to make sure that wherever it's supposed to go, that it's in the right place, in the right place. Going at least go in the right direction. I will say that sometimes, but. So that's, it really keeps, to me, circling back to people for every aspect of this. The scale-up part is definitely automation. We're seeing this more and more. There's some automation that you can buy, but radiopharmaceuticals are unique and they're made different ways. And so we've had to get guys in-house who are in-house automation team. They work on PLCs, programming, and all the moving parts and pieces, design engineers building all the parts and pieces that will move and transfer things from point A to point B. And then we're also working with integrators who help with commercial PLC systems to get those to be able to do larger scale, faster, type commercial-oriented processes.
Excellent. Now, I've been paying attention, and you've brought up people quite a few times in what we've been talking about. I know that you guys have been working in particular to identify and then address skills or gaps in people's development, in particular manufacturing. I think you guys are working pretty closely with our friend over here, Kara, who, by the way, has the coolest shoes. If you haven't seen the shoes, you got to check them out. But can you tell us a little bit about what you guys are doing to address training with regard to workforce?
Yeah, absolutely, and I appreciate Kara being here today. I mean, what she's trying to do and launch this program, I mean, we need to support her. We need to support that program the best that we can. Our company is all in. We're going to do whatever we can do to help her. There's space in the facility that's being built out. It looks really nice. So hopefully, some of these folks can come into that and in Kara's program and then be more formally trained. You can train in a lot of ways for people to come in if you have just a commercial systemic process that you give them SOPs, but that doesn't always necessarily mean they know exactly what they're doing. And for people that are in quality, those people have a special challenge because everything's fine until maybe a reading or a number isn't quite right or something like that, or maybe it is, maybe the detector's bad, there's things happen. Those people need to go through a class like that. They need that master's level equivalency to be able to understand what does this mean, not just, I've run 1,000 HPLC runs and I know what I'm expecting, what we're expecting to see, but when something's a little bit different, that requires a level of training that's for people that are coming out of this course.
It's funny you bring up quality. For a long time, every time quality would come up in the company I used to work at, I would always tell people I'm not a quality person. And too many people quickly agreed to that. I don't know why. Sumit, I would love to hear from your perspective. As I said earlier, I know you look at a lot of these different bioclusters, in particular the ones that are, developing radiopharmaceutical specialty. Looking at Indiana, where do you see potential gaps or bottlenecks that we really need to make sure that we're looking into and addressing?
Yeah, I think it was brought up in the earlier sessions around clinical trials and access to capital. To me, that is really the lagger for the state. I think somebody talked about MD Anderson and their programs and seeing how they've been successful. We have a lot to learn from those programs. As I think about just the clinical trial journey and back to the call to action, radiopharmaceuticals have been very focused right now towards neuroendocrine tumors, SSTRs, and prostate. If we just go back to this entire ecosystem and think about what the journey looks like and what can be done, there's interesting targets out there that are needed from patients who are waiting for these modalities. If I go back to the conversation we had earlier around pediatric cancer, some of the more challenging solid tumors in the market space, like pancreatic cancer, and also the larger ones like lung cancer. Small cell lung cancer impacts about 250,000 people dying on an annual basis in the US. All these become really, really prime from a clinical trial program. And the fact that you have so many isotope companies here available to provide these in this just-in-time manufacturing, where you don't have to go through these big deserts, so to speak, and try to ship it through all these logistics things, which are pretty challenging versus just taking a box truck from one facility right to the medical centers and getting that clinical trial going, especially for personalized medicine and that precision dose, is going to be a game changer for all of us. In my humble opinion, that's where Indiana should take the charge. They should just establish not just the request for the money piece, which is important, but be heavily focused on how can we take what we've learned from the successes of Pluvicto and Lutathera, convert those to immediate clinical trial programs. Because even if you think about the phase 1 side, 15 patients, that's what in some cases, that's all you need to get the right readouts. That's a massive undertaking when you think about the treatments that are needed out there. So generally speaking, many bioclusters out there, especially Boston, San Diego, are already figuring that formula, but they don't have the kind of assets you do. And I would highly encourage to continue getting there. And the last point I would say is back to Dr. Kara Weatherman. She's figured out a very strong master's program. It's world-class. There are not many people who have this kind of asset locally, let alone being able to come and compete in the space. I would say keep building that, but also think about the number of jobs that are needed from a workforce development side. When you aggregate all the jobs, you keep hearing all the big pharma companies spending $5 billion on this, $6 billion on that. Where are these jobs? Who's going to run these complex companies? You heard Matt talk about robotics. That's the future of the state. Now, if you aggregate all that, that's 1.1 million jobs that need either some type of retooling or new workforce development to make them effective to make these therapeutic products for us. So to me, the call to action is also learn from what Kara has done. Develop the next set of workforce development that can enable this job creation market and keep enhancing Indiana's value. Today, it's $99 billion from just pharmaceutical drug products. Think of it as, can we get to 200? And what do you need to do that? And how many jobs will it create? And then work backwards from an investment side from a medical community, the translational science, and keep building that ecosystem.
That's excellent. Really, really well said. We're getting short on time. I'm going to ask one last question. I'll pose this to all of you. And this might be a little bit different than what we discussed previously, so I'm going to put them on the spot a little bit here. But think out over the coming 10 years. Think about what about this space? Because things, as the physicians were saying earlier, like some of this stuff didn't exist when they were, coming out of medical school. The technology's moving so quickly, and you're all working on various aspects of this particular technology. When you think about the next 10 years, what are you most excited about? What do you have the most hope for or excited about? And what, if anything other than what Sumit just said from your individual perspectives, and maybe if Sumit, you think of something else, what else do we as Indiana need to make sure we're doing over the next 10 years to make sure we're able to realize some of those hopes and aspirations that you might articulate for us? So David, would it be okay to start with you?
Absolutely. For me, there's two things that are very clear. So we have the privilege of having clients come to us to evaluate their targeting compounds and what we can do with those and develop those. And it's been very interesting to me to see what's been coming to us in this last year. We spent a lot of time in previous years with MABs, FABs, and all the derivatives of those, peptides as well, some small molecules, but we are seeing a lot more small molecules that are interesting, very different targeting. We're seeing particles and all different kinds. We're seeing things that we are going to radio label, but they have no known targeting mechanism, but somehow they do, that we're still trying to sort out, why does this work? So I see a lot of these things coming, and it is very interesting to me to see, how this is going to be turned around. The other thing is, most of the people who come to us, at the time they come to us and invest in this, they have a lot of high hopes, and there's good science behind it. People usually don't come. We do have some people that come to us with just an idea, and we are happy to work through those. But most people have done a lot of legwork behind the scenes to really highly develop these targeting compounds. So we're very excited to see what's going to be coming up here in the next few years. And then the other thing is invest in people. Again, I'll say it again. That's what's going to get us there.
Love it. Matthew, your thoughts?
So I completely agree with what David has to say. I think people and investing in people is going to be one of the primary drivers of how this continues to advance, and probably the number one priority from a state perspective. And I think it's investing in people, but in the fundamental knowledge of problem solving. Like that's ultimately what is going to continue to drive this workforce. The repetitive actions, the day-to-day, performing monotonous activities is ultimately going to be, I'll just say, replaced by some sort of automation and AI, right? But what won't get replaced is our ability to think critically and problem solve. Now, there'll be tools to help and speed that up, but building a workforce that can problem solve and just be comfortable in the complexity and uncertainty that problems bring is what's going to continue to drive this industry, what's going to continue to make this move a lot faster, and ultimately build more reliable patient access. So that's probably the number one thing I would say. And I would say that probably the most excited I am right now is about the work that is being done with other isotopes, especially alpha emitters. That's going to be the thing that really starts to get us away from, I feel, therapies and gets closer to that cure and remission.
That is exciting. That is super exciting. And speaking about problem solving, I mean, that's what you guys do on a daily basis. This whole thing is, constantly building an airplane while you're trying to fly it, right? I mean, you guys are supreme problem solvers. Sumit, I'm going to give you the last word on, aspiration for the future and things that we need to think about.
Sure, Mike. I'm going to go a bit on geek mode on a sell for the team. I'm a big fan of precision and personalized medicine, and we are very far from it. In my view, just tying back to targeted alpha therapy and where the promise is, if we can be very focused towards looking at it from a personalized dosimetry and try to focus on that attention, because patients don't need that kind of toxicity in their bodies. If we can truly move away from these dose escalation studies and be focused towards patient care and personalizing for them, to me, that's a big difference. And if you can then get into combination therapies, whereby you're able to use what's happening in multiple models of cancer treatment to be all working together and sync them up, to me, that's a big difference. You know, today, no offense to our oncologist community, but the medical oncs and the surg oncs and rad oncs, they're not like one view of how to go about that. And we're missing out on some really great modalities. Like I've been fortunate to have worked in vaccines and cell and gene therapy and nuclear, where I see some really interesting crossroads where you can tie treatments, especially for challenging areas like glioblastoma, where you're going in and performing a tumor resection and adding just a bit of more gamma type emissions could make a big difference on these patients. And I think we should try to take advantage of learning more and getting AI to support better combination therapies for curative.
Awesome, thank you. Help me thank our panelists for their contributions today. I'm now going to turn it back over to Vince Wong to maybe do some Q&A and close us out.
Great, thanks, gentlemen. Great discussion about RLT and fascinating developments for that exciting area for oncology therapies. I will now open up to questions. Any of the panelists are game to answer any questions, right, gentlemen? So, anyone in the audience have questions? None?
I'll ask.
All right, Lake.
I'm always good for questions.
Is Jim still over there?
Yes.
Yes.
I've always wanted to ask this. Was there any sort of unique sensation as you're receiving your doses of Pluvicto, or was it just like getting an infusion of anything? And if the answer is no, is there any other interesting experiences? Were there any other interesting experiences from actually receiving the drug itself?
The number of people in the room kind of caused me to wonder what was going on. Sometimes the physician, Dr. Price, was there, and maybe a couple of people that are learning how to do this and such. But it was, it seemed really different. Everybody's a little more careful. You get scanned going out and slip out the back door and things like that. So it was more clandestine, I guess, but no, I had infusion therapy. I've had lots of sticks, and this was just another one.
Question in the back.
Thank you so much. This has been very insightful. Shelley Yoder drove up from Bloomington. I served in the state senate for the county, and when we were talking about investment in cancer research, I think it would be helpful to have an idea of what is the range? What would be a good amount? Are we looking for just a partner, a signal, or are we looking for this would actually move the needle? I think that range would be helpful as we head into another budget session.
Right. Anyone want to offer any suggested investments from the state? Senator Yoder's here. I appreciate you coming, Senator Yoder. It's very meaningful that you're here to hear from this community. One highest watermark is $6 billion from Texas. It's hard to go from 0 to $6 billion, even in a fast car. But there's lots of gradations between there. Calvin, Dr. Lee, do you want to offer some perspectives as a
So the short answer is the more the better. But I think that the state's investment is not just here's the bundle of money and go spend it. I think it breaks down into a lot of different things depending on what the state and its partners want to accomplish. So certainly there is the research component to do research, especially in areas that are perhaps not as well investigated or not as well funded. Certainly that Robin will tell you, in like the rare diseases, it's one area. Prevention and screening are another area that is not particularly lucrative to put a word on it. But there's also workforce development. How do you invest in that? We always say at IU that the life cycle of biotech in Indiana is that somebody doesn't know anything, they come to IU, they get trained, Lilly hires them away for more money, and then they come back when they retire as vice president. So that's the life cycle. But it is an important aspect of how do you do workforce development. How do you keep your bright people, your bright Hoosiers in the state, and especially your younger folks. How do you build a innovation and a knowledge economy? So I think there's a lot of different aspects of a state investment into research that will benefit clearly the state, make it an attractive place for other biotech companies to come in and say, gosh, we want to come there because their kids are well educated, their workforce is great, the economic environment is good. There are lots of other people to interact with, and there are lots of universities, Purdue, Notre Dame, IU, Ball, Muncie, other great places to interact with. So I think those are the areas that I think will be very important.
Senator Yoder, to double click on what Texas is doing, they've got 3 dimensions that Dr. Lee kind of touched upon. One is funding prevention. So throughout the entire state of Texas are population health screening efforts across a number of different types of cancer types. So that's very appealing because every Texas citizen is benefiting from that. Second dimension for that is also state-sponsored research. So fundamental research happening at the Academic Research Center. So MD Anderson is MD Anderson in large part because of this investment from the state of Texas. And the third dimension is startups. So they give non-dilutive funding to startups that locate into Texas in a significant amount. So there's really 3 prongs, 3 legs in their stool that serves as a bit of a model for that we could pursue as a state. So, and happy to work with you on that concept. Yep, Carolyn.
Sorry, and Senator, obviously, I'm Kara Weatherman. I teach at Purdue University, and we've developed new radiopharmaceutical master's programs and things to really kind of try to pull Indiana and the state, obviously, into where we can take all these different aspects that are related to radiopharma manufacturing and trying to pull it together in a very cohesive unit. But I do think one of the things that is always a challenge at any of the academic institutions in the state is the funding for just that kind of training, right? Workforce development is critical. Everybody says it. But then when you turn around and you work in a specialty area like radiopharma, spending $500,000 on a training facility so people can get hands-on, actual hands-on work with radioactivity before they step in there is almost impossible because that kind of funding doesn't exist. And so I guess my thought is, some of these more niche areas, they're small, they don't fit particularly well in some of the general workforce development categories that are pulled out. But, some of those folks need some of the most specialized training, and that's very difficult to come across with a typical academic budget or, luckily we have a lot of support from our industry partners at Purdue, which is great. And, but I also think some of that load needs to come back on the state, especially in public institutions and things like that.
I'd love to just say something real quick. Senator Yoder, we've met before. I'm Robin Spoon from Elevate Childhood Cancer Research and Advocacy and the Indiana Pediatric Cancer Coalition. Incredibly grateful for your leadership this last couple of years in this area and listening to us. And I think part of the reason why I've been so invested in what's happening in Indiana here is because I've traveled all over the world, and every time I come back to Indiana, I am blown away by all that's happening, and I think you're seeing that in the room today. And I know that the last couple of years we've been really fighting for research dollars, and of course we have been for pediatric cancer research because, no offense to the market, but it's been quite a market failure. But I will say that everything everybody else is here saying today is incredibly important to all of us as well. How do we ramp up clinical trials for the patient access?
the more that we do in this space here to support what's happening, the more that that's gonna happen. But for us as well, I'm sorry, I missed your name, to the previous comments, that pediatric cancer research has an enormous amount of specialty area needs as well. But anything that we can do to support what's happening holistically in the state here would be amazing. A lot of really amazing things can happen for science and for patients here in the state. So thank you.
I also want to recognize Representative Bennings here as well, so thank you for joining us, Representative. Another question, please?
Yes, I'm Blake Neubauer from Tychos Laboratories, and to the representative and senator, I would say that the ability to obtain non-dilutive funding from the state for matching federal awards, which that's an interesting situation currently, but just any kind of non-dilutive funding for early stage research is a big boost to the efforts that are going on, because it allows you to go outside the limitations of your grant or contract applications, and it allows you to generate the information that's needed to obtain subsequent awards. So these things, Elevate Ventures awards, the state matching funds through IDEC, these things are very important, and they do have limitations. Our company has basically tapped out our limit. And with the current funding, we're looking at, we can't donate kidneys or, sell blood, but we really are at a point where this is important funding, and hopefully the state can support additional resources. Thank you.
Thank you. Great discussion.
One, more of a comment, and Senator, thank you for being here as well as the representative. So I think something we don't talk much about is we actually have cancers that we can eradicate from the community, and that is cervical cancer. And we've tried this in pockets, but I think they've continued to push the state to say if we screen all women that are of age for HPV, we can eradicate cervical cancer. We have the tools. That is a cancer that can easily be erased from our communities, but we need to work with the state for underserved populations. So I mean that one's an easy one.
Thanks, Juan. Great discussion. Any other comments, questions?
Second is simply treats a lot of patients with cervical cancer from a neurologic perspective. The propensity of advanced disease. As somebody who treats a lot of cervical cancer patients because of their urologic comorbidities, the amount of advanced disease that is presenting in our community in young women, it's devastating. So I do a surgical mission trip to Africa every year where I do about 50 surgeries in a week-long period. The disease that presents in some of our underserviced areas is very equivalent to what I see abroad, and that needs to change, and it can change.
Any other comments, or should we retire to beverages and appetizers? Maybe one last question, anyone? All right. Well, what a great gathering and discussion. Covered a lot of waterfronts in the exciting area of cancer therapy, diagnostics. Cancer sucks. It's never good to have cancer, but at the same time, there's no better time to have cancer because of the amazing innovation that's happening with regard to early detection, therapy selection, targeted therapies. And a lot of that innovation is happening here in Indiana, so we have a lot to be proud of as a state in the way that we're contributing in a meaningful way to improve the standard of care for patients, not only here in Indiana, but throughout the world. So thank you all for coming and for all your work that you're doing to advance life sciences. Thank you.